Hello! Today I will be talking about all the books I read in September. I read 8 books in September and 2 of them got straight to my favorite books of all time. I'm going to talk about those 2 at the end of the video, and I'll talk about the other ones in the order I've read them in. So the first book I read in September was called September. By Annelies Verbeke. She's a Belgian author. This is the first book of a new series that a Dutch indie publisher is putting out. They will ask a different author each month to write a novella. I think they have a lot of freedom in what they write about, as long as it just sort of connects to each month. And in September the author has collected all her planners of the last 15 years, and she talks about what she's been doing in September of each year. Mixed with that are all sort of musings, all to do with different things related to September, like poems or songs with September in the title, or important events happening in September. I thought it was an interesting approach to the topic, and I enjoyed it while I was reading it, but I don't think I'll reread it again. But the premise of the whole series sounds very interesting, and I think I'll try and read the new book each month it comes out, and it'll be a great way to discover some new authors. The next book is Brickmakers by Selva Almada, and this is translated from the Spanish by Annelies. Selva Almada is an Argentinian author, and this book starts in the very early hours of the morning, and there's 2 young boys mortally wounded after a fight, lying down on the ground in an amusement park. And while they are dying, they are having these hallucinations or like memories of their fathers. One of them had a father who was murdered, and the other one had a very abusive father. And then in the rest of the book you follow the journey of these fathers who were rivals in their work of brickmaking. And they are constantly in this sort of petty feud with each other. You see how this feud is passed on to their sons, who actually start out as friends but become enemies. The big theme of this book is what it is like to grow up in a macho culture. Both fathers are very much concerned with upholding this really masculine image, and how growing up in this macho culture was like for these 2 boys. I think Selva Almada is really great at setting a scene, and she did that in her another book I read by her as well, The Wind That Lays Waste. She really captures this sort of grimy, oppressive, ominous atmosphere. What I didn't like as much is that there's a queer relationship, which was very much at the heart of the story, but not so much at the heart of the book, if that makes sense. It felt like this queer relationship was the catalyst of the story, but it didn't get that much attention, and I wish it was explored a bit more. Now it sort of ended up in this bury your gaze trope, which I thought could have been avoided. So all in all, I like Selva Almada's style, and she explores some interesting themes in this book, but overall I think the story could have been paced better. Next I read Clock Without Hands by Carson McCullers. This is the third book I've read by her. I have read The Heart is a Lonely Hunter and The Member of the Wedding previously. I enjoyed this one the least of those 3, and I think it might have something to do that this book has male protagonists, and I missed having the female perspective. That is very strong in those other 2 books. This book doesn't have much of a plot, or at least that's not what's central to the book. We meet 4 different men who are all connected to each other in some way. And for different reasons, these 4 men are all unlikable and infuriating. They all have their personal struggles and issues they are dealing with. They all have an idea how they should be treated, what their role in society is, and how society could be improved. And they all think that their view is the only right view. They are all very single-minded, and I think Carson McCullers shows in this book that were these 4 men all a little bit more open-minded, they could have helped each other a lot more and sort of lifted each other up. So I really liked how the author did a deep dive into these characters. It had some interesting commentary on race and class issue at the time, but I felt it needed something more to just bring it all together. I definitely recommend reading her books, but I probably wouldn't start with this one. I also read Gathering Moss, A Natural and Cultural History of Mosses by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Braiding Sweetgrass by this author is one of the best nature writing books I have ever read. So I had really high hopes for this one. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as Braiding Sweetgrass. That one has a more broad scope of nature writing, and it has more place for the sort of indigenous storytelling, whereas this one is more focused on one topic and more on the biology side of things. But still an excellent book. It consists of different essays all about moss. Usually the author will talk about something she's been noticing in her walks, in her daily life, in her interaction with other people, and then she'll connect that to different mosses and how they grow and how they spread and their different unique properties and uses are. And I said this in my reading vlog as well. Robin Wall Kimmerer is definitely an author that makes me feel more connected to nature and pay more close attention to my surroundings. The author is a botanist, so a scientist, and she's also from Potawatomi heritage. And for her, and also in this book, those 2 aspects of her life seamlessly blend together. So the way she talks about nature is very unique because she just has those 2 different aspects coming together. So yeah, definitely recommend checking out her work. Then we have When I Sing Mountains Dance by Irene Sola, and this was translated from the Catalan by Mara Faye Latham. And at the start of this book we meet a man who is out gathering mushrooms on the mountains when a thunderstorm comes and he's struck by lightning and he dies. And then the rest of the book is about what the repercussions of him dying are for his family, and how their lives move on after his death. And what makes this book so special is that every chapter is told from a different perspective. There's the man himself, there's his wife, there's his children, other people who live in the neighborhood. But there's also different perspectives from things like animals, the mountain itself, the mushrooms, the clouds, which I thought was very beautifully done, but also a bit confusing. I really found it hard to keep track of the actual storyline and trying to find out how all these perspectives fit together. it was like a puzzle I didn't quite get to fit. But the writing in this is just chef's kiss. Especially the non-human voices were so poetically done, and I really loved reading those. I think I'll read you the first paragraph of the book, just to give you a taste of the writing. I think it's very much down to taste whether you like it or not. I think you're either mesmerized by it or you really can't stand it. So if you enjoy the first paragraph, you'll enjoy the rest of the book, and otherwise it's not going to be for you. So, Chapter 1, Lightning. We arrived with full bellies, painfully full, black bellies, burdened with cold, dark water, lightning bolts and thunderclaps. We came from the sea and from other mountains, and from unthinkable places, and we'd seen unthinkable things. We scratched at the rock atop the peaks, as if we bore salt, to ensure not even weeds would sprout there. We chose the colour of the hills and the fields, and the gleams in rivers, and the glints in upward glancing eyes. When the wild beasts caught sight of us, they cowered deep in their caves and crimped their necks, lifting their snouts to catch the scent of damp earth approaching. We covered them all like a blanket. The oak and the boxwood and the birch and the fir. Shh. And they all went silent, because we were in stern roof, and it was up to us to decide who would have the tranquility and joy of a dry soul. After our arrival, all was stillness and pressure, and we forced the thin air down to bedrock, and then let loose the first thunderclap. So yeah, that was the perspective of the clouds. I love the style of this book, and it is definitely an intriguing read, one I think I will revisit just to try and make a bit more sense of it. I also read Olga Dies Dreaming by Xochitl Gonzales, and this is a book I found very overwhelming. It's about Olga and her brother Pedro. They have Puerto Rican roots, and they both have very successful careers in New York. Olga is a very sought after wedding planner for the rich and famous, and Pedro is a popular congressman who represents their Latinx community in Brooklyn. And this book is about all the personal and professional problems they face. One thing that affects them both is their mother abandoned them when they were children to become a radical, fighting for a political cause, namely the independence of Puerto Rico. They don't have any contact with her anymore because their mother is keeping them away, but they do occasionally get letters from her where she mainly tells them why she doesn't improve of any of the choices they make in their lives. And these letters are all scattered throughout the book. During the course of this book, Hurricane Maria hits Puerto Rico. So it talks about the aftermath of that and how it changes the political relationships between the US and Puerto Rico. It talks about what it's like to be a first generation American and what it's like to have a successful career when you also have strong connections to a country where people have a lot less opportunities. It has Olga struggling with relationships with men and dating and being scared of starting a serious relationship. It talks about Pedro having difficulties finding out the political landscape can be very corrupt and what his role in this may be. He's also coming out as gay and finding out he's HIV positive and how he can fit that in his political career. There's talk about stereotypes of the Latinx community. There's talk about gentrification. The Russian mob is involved in this story somehow. So this book has a lot going on, and for me it was just too much. I felt like the author had a lot to say and try to put it all in one book. And unfortunately that meant that none of these topics really got their due, and it felt very cramped, which is a shame because I thought moments of this book were really brilliant and I really liked the tone she takes in this book, but in the end it was a bit of a disappointment, unfortunately. And now on to my favorite books of the month. Both of these books really reminded me why I love to read. This is what I'm hoping to get every time I pick up a new book, a book that just sort of speaks to your soul. I know that sounds loopy, but you'll know what I mean. And these books both did that, albeit in very different ways. So let's start with Ace, What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society and the Meaning of Sex by Angela Chen. So for a long time I've been feeling I'm queer in some way, in that I don't feel at home in the heteronormative trajectory relationships and sex are supposed to take, and I've been just sort of exploring in where I fit in, and this book hasn't given me the answer, but it has given me a whole new space to be in, if that makes sense. But I do think everyone will benefit from reading this book, just because it is so broad in scope and so applicable to all kinds of relationships, even if you're not asexual. So in this book, Angela Chen talks about her own journey, finding out her asexuality, and she also interviews several other aces and talks about their experiences. She divides this book into 3 parts, and the first one is called Self, and that is very much about the asexual identity. She discusses the definition of asexuality and how it's not a binary but a spectrum. She talks about the importance of vocabulary and how it is important to pull apart things like sexual desire, sex drive, sexual attraction, because they're often seen as one thing, but you can experience one without the other. The second part of the book talks about the intersectionality of asexuality. One topic she touches is asexuality and feminism. A big part of feminism is the sexual liberation of women and what role asexuality plays in that. She discusses race and the different stereotypes there exist about different racial identities and sex. And she also discusses disability and the assumptions that exist around disability and sex. And then the last section is about relationship with others. She talks about living in a society where sex is very much political and is very much all around us, you know, sort of the one thing that drives everything forward, and also what it's like to be in a relationship with someone who's asexual or being an asexual in a relationship with someone who isn't, and how to deal with the differences in sexual desire, you know, and how to build a relationship on that. I mean, there's a whole lot more discussed in this book. So many different topics being delved into. It has absolutely opened my eyes on a personal level, but also on the way society works and how people connect with each other. As you can see, I have a lot of tabs in this book, so I would 100% suggest you check out this book, because I can guarantee you will get something out of it. And then the last book, which has absolutely stolen my heart, I love this book so much. It is Still Life by Sarah Winman. So this book starts in 1944. Ulysses Temper is a young British soldier who is stationed in Florence in Italy, and Evelyn Skinner, who is a 60-something-year-old art historian who's trying to salvage some paintings which were stolen. And they very much perchance meet and they get to spend an evening together. And and they really hit it off, and they have this very special friendship, very special connection. However, after that evening they each go their separate ways. And in the rest of the book we mainly follow Ulysses. He goes back to London to his wife and the pub he works in, and we meet this group of people who are all centered around this pub. This group is all connected in some way, and they have an obvious shared history together. And you never really find out how this sort of seemingly hodgepodge group of people got together, but they are, and you follow their lives moving forward. Ulysses at some point in the book has gets an opportunity to move back to Italy, which he takes because Italy has always stayed very special to him. And in the story we sort of move about between London, and in particular this pub, and Florence. And then Evelyn keeps coming back as well, although the two of them just keep on narrowly missing each other. And it is absolutely the characters that drive this book forward. Yes, there's some exciting things happening, the writing is beautiful, the descriptions of the Italian scenery and the food will definitely make you want to visit Italy. But it is this group of people at the heart of the book that makes this book so special. These are all very much complex and fleshed out characters. None of them are perfect. They all have their idiosyncrasies and their charms, but they also all make mistakes. But the bond between them is so strong that they are all allowed to make these mistakes and just to be themselves and be who they are. And that's what makes this book so moving and heartwarming. This idea of a found family who just looks out for each other. This is a book I can see myself reading time and time again, just to spend more time with these characters who I just love so much. So those were the 8 books I read in September, with 2 new favorites. I'd love to talk to you about any of these books, so if you have any comments, just leave them down below, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye bye.